I'm so happy to have the chance to introduce our first reader, Leslie Schultz, from Winona, Minnesota this evening. Leslie's most recent collection of poetry, Geranium Lake, Poems on Art and Art Making, was published in 2024, and it is a gem. Her previous collections include Still Life with Poppies, Cloud Song, Concertina. She also has published two chapbooks, Light-Hearted Poems for Dark Times, which some of us could surely use right about now, and Living Room. Leslie's work is well published, appearing in many journals, a few of which include Poet Lore, Midwest Quarterly, Able Muse, Orchard's Poetry Journal, Pensive, Blue Unicorn, and Third Wednesday. Twice nominated for Pushcart Prizes, she serves as a judge for the Maria W. Faust Sonnet Contest. Leslie herself loves to write sonnets and has been a several-time winner of that contest. Leslie has been writing since childhood, writes daily to fuel her writing passion, and likes being in a group with others who care about words. Being in a group with Leslie is a real gift, as she is an astute reader of others' work and gives thoughtful, useful feedback. Leslie's blog site is called Winona Media, Poems and Stories from the Heart. It's been in publication for 14 years and is currently focused on poetry, photography, and personal essay. Geranium Lake is filled with ekphrastic poetry, meditations on art and life, and the making of both. It's filled with beautiful language and imagery throughout its 8 sections. Who could not fall in love with lines like, "A smile flickers at the corner of her mouth like a paper white moth"? Section 3, Ars Poetica, especially captivated me as a struggling practitioner. Geranium Lake is a treat for both the senses and the intellect. In addition to poems, Leslie publishes photographs, essays, and fiction, makes quilts and soups, and happily mucks about in a garden plagued by shade, rabbits, and walnut trees. Please welcome Leslie.
Thank you, Lisa. I so appreciate that. Yeah, David, I'm in that less famous category, and I'm glad to be here tonight reading to all of you. I think Crazy Wisdom Poetry Circle, best name ever for a literary venue. So I'm going to be reading, as Lisa suggested, most of the work will come from this new collection. But I'm going to slip in a couple from previous collections at the request of a couple of friends. I'd like to start by I think everyone here would agree that art is always in conversation with other works of art and other artists. And the first poem I'm going to read began as an attempt to find out why a poem that I love so much that I inadvertently memorized it, why was it so stunning to me? I used the same rhyme scheme, the same metrical scheme to explore that. Ended up concluding that it had a few echoes of the deathless poem by Robert Frost called Fire and Ice. But Frost, stands above it. Nonetheless, here is a poem called The Craft of Poetry. It's dedicated to Robert Frost. Some artists build facades in stone, some build in steel. Poets craft from blood and bone, make common language all their own, seduce us onto Ixion's wheel by our own yearning and desire. We learn to turn toward what we feel, to brave love's fire and scorched reveal. So that poem ends with fire. The next poem I'm going to read is at the request of my friend, poet Lynn Lawrence. And it's from my collection called Cloud Song. It's called Ice, and it's for neighbors of mine, Karina and Elvin Heiberg, dedicated to them. A local happening that was just plain weird. Crossing the bridge, glancing left to the north, I break and gasp. It cannot be, but is. I couldn't be more amazed if two lithe ballerinas in full tutus, toe shoes, and tiaras lounged there on the thin ice that partially clouds the dark, turbulent waters of the Cannon River. Sun slants like golden curtains on a pair of swans, escaped ornamentals, but wedded fast. Bridal white with black beaks, they curve against the currents of air that separate their slender throats, each holding up its own heart half, gesturing the shape of love, as ephemeral, as vital as breath. And this third poem is an earlier poem. It was published in my first collection, Still Life with Poppy's Elegies. It could actually go in Geranium Lake, but it was inspired, if you can see this book, it's an oral history of quilting, and it contains the oral history itself, along with photographs of the quilters and things in the environment that, like hedgerows and so on, that gave rise to the traditional quilt patterns. There's something too, for those of you who aren't quilters, good to know that two little facts. One is that red fabric tends not to fade. The blacks fade, the reds tend not to. And also in the log cabin pattern, it's traditional to have a red square right in the center to represent the hearth and the fire there. So this book is called, or this poem inspired by the book is called The Book of Quilts. Every parting is a death. To join is holy. 1. The photograph. Hattie Waddell at 20, Jasper, Texas. Wrapped in double wedding rings, she rocks on the front porch, piecing. Across from her, a tin love seat. Above, the shingles, dancing octagons, carry rain from the roof down a glittering drain spout back to the kitchen garden. Her lap fills with diamonds, colored like new lettuce. 2, the pattern. This background, a reverse field, now crosses, now stars, both dark and the positive light tell of the first split, birds in flight falling on sections of blue ether, pennants of gold like standards, quadrangles of blood. 3, prairie women. Is it the lone star or the star of Bethlehem? They pieced for sanity, for silence in the wind's continuing, stasis in the shifting dust. Their faded dresses, rose, indigo, black, warmed the cooling bodies of their dead, an embrace to last. They knew, they must have known, that a central vivid red, like fire at midnight, outlives any dark. That something resides in the groans of windmills and tight joists, in shingles creaking and chicken wire, and in the long boards of a house, that some order abides in even the craziest patched quilt. I had this book and I wrote that poem long before I learned to quilt, but it inspired me to learn. Now I've made a lot of quilts. At this point, I would like to read for you the title poem of this new collection, and it will explain the title. It's called Geranium Lake, and it starts with an excerpt from a letter that Vincent van Gogh wrote to his brother Theo, who was his, not just his brother, but who offered financial and moral support. Van Gogh wrote, "All the colors that Impressionism has made fashionable are unstable. All the more reason boldly to use them too raw. Time will only soften them too much." Who knew that paintings fade like flowers? Van Gogh foresaw the unstable quality of his pigments, so he impressed them vividly onto prepared canvases, as in his late picture of a man walking with a woman, arms entwined, air heavy as blue metal, trees spaced like columns in a sunken Doric temple, where undergrowth, thick and wavy as seaweed, blooms with unearthly color, yellow, orange, white. But that fugitive one, called Spark and Geranium Lake, sent from afar by Theo, used to make a brief flowering of pinks, has faded to shy white. Quite the opposite of that April trillium at the base of my elm that emerges now like snow, then blushes each season into oblivion, shaded by showy daylilies, shrouded afresh in the mystery of understory. This is the story, the way of man, of woman, of all flesh. This collection, Geranium Lake, has 8 sections, and each is more or less focused on a particular kind of art. The whole collection is dedicated to my sister Carla, who is a really fabulous photographer of the wildlife in all forms, especially birds. This particular poem is about a photograph. Photography is writing with light. And I want to read this poem, which is based or inspired by a family photograph. And I'm reading it for my friend Julia Den, who responds to poetry and old photographs. It's called A Necklace of Fat Pearls. It's like a painting, a bad one, without a frame or provenance, arty, not art. She wears a necklace of fat pearls. Her eyes are stern, confronting the camera. Her left shoulder is camouflaged in shadow. She was my grandmother, Marie, born in 1914, pushed in her wicker pram through the Great War, here, an unsmiling bride. The photograph is washed with the long ago ivory of piano keys, one side damaged, as though her dress were slightly torn. How am I linked to these stiffened curls? — paper light, she embodies a lost era. Behind her, an operatic canvas, inky poplars, and a formal fountain gushing, two converging arcs suggesting a heart. Beside her, a small table with a dish heaped with orange blossoms, tied with a mass of satin ribbon. No real clues. I rest my eyes away. Some of her is in me, a stain of genes and family tone and gesture I will never comprehend. What I wish for is her happiness, ridiculous since she is 8 years dead. Wealth and children did not impinge on her set peevishness. My hunger for her healing won't soften her eye. I might as well drink that painted fountain, eat that souffle of flowers on her dish. And now I'd like to turn to a pretty lively musical poem. It's really in honor of my brother-in-law, Luke, who gave us tickets to a really memorable concert and introduced us that way to the wonderful CD whose title is The Last Line. It's called Music So Loud We Can't Hear. Joe Bonamassa concert, March 18th, 2017. It's as if all the thunder and bison hooves pounding over the Great Plains for centuries, the spiral winds turning skies green, and all the demon freight trains who shriek across burnt horizons have gathered here in Minneapolis on stage at the Orpheum Theater. Thanks to Benjamin Franklin, his kite and key and legacy of innovation at GE, we are temporarily deafened. Our ears sheared free of their function and hearing itself driven deep into our chests, nearing the knocking of our hearts, and even deeper toward the lost hell of Orpheus himself, into the mineral music of our very bones. Now we're tuned to a new key, flung beyond anticipation into agitated deep seas, the blues of desperation. I found in putting this collection together, I couldn't have the collection without a section on the way nature appears to me to be a fabulous artist every season. So this is a little prairie poem. It's called Notes on Design. If I yearned for the Rococo, where would I go here on the prairie? Schooled by craftsman oak, fine grain, fresh air, and sunlight, I'm surprised by excess. Yet, behold these whorls chiseled by blue winds, marking this grand facade of snow. And this poem, next poem, is it's one that's important to me because I think a lot of us feel at times that we don't know how to respond to world events. Here was an example for me of a friend who did this, and I took photos of him holding up his creations. I'm reading it tonight for a friend of mine who's a poet. Her name is Barbara Geary Truen. She lives in Switzerland, so she can't attend because it's just too late where she's living. It's called A Gesture of Peace for Kazuhiko Watase. My friend has been folding cranes, prayer flags of thin colored paper transform under his fingers into gentle shapes of longevity. Walking in the mountains above Albuquerque, he finds dried cactus spines, light, hollow, strong, brings them home. Now he is threading a needle, stringing lines of cranes into trembling flocks, each hanging from the thinnest support. Each flock, an aerial ballet of yellow and blue birds fluttering like the silk of the Ukrainian flag, alive in the war-tattered sky. He did 1,000, by the way. This next poem is called Ichthyography. It's from the artist nature as artist section. What would it be like, the writing of fish? Something shining, I think. A muscular, flowing calligraphy, a Piscean script, accents of whirlpool and fin flip, shimmering, colorful circumlocutions used, like kennings, over and over, and with lots of sudden twists and turns in the plot. Breaks as long as winter, slower to resolve than river fog rising. What would it be like to write not with ink or light, but with water, describing each syllable with my whole body, then erasing it all as I go, every gesture a metaphor. I've just got two more. The first is the first couple sections from the central poem of the collection. This poem took me 20 years to write. It's 9 sections long. It would not exist without the Minneapolis Institute of Arts. The poems are inspired by the museum itself, a meditation on what we keep, what we venerate, and also on some particular works of art, primarily an Egyptian mummy and casing called Lady Tashat. There was next to her for a time, there was an X-ray of what was inside underneath. And that was what inspired me at first, the mystery of that. I also think that this poem explores the line between what is a human being and what is a work of art. It alternates sections in the voice of Lady Tashat and the voice of the museum goer, which would be me. Okay, so just sections 1 and 2. Lady Tashat's mystery. That which is hidden might be preserved. One day it will come to light. 1. Reading the bones. Under the desert sand, under the rock, behind the false door, behind the true, beneath 2 heavy lids and 2 painted smiles, beneath the linen tapes, stiff with unguent, I am revealed. I can tell no more. But if my riddle begins to tap like an ibis bill inside your head, then you already have the map. And I, though chill, am not utterly dead. 2. The museum goer. The snows of Minneapolis are white as marble dust and cut the nostrils like fragments of bad dreams. The Institute, too, is white stone, a slippery mountain behind the delicate teepees pitched on a frozen lawn. Inside, treasures of 6 continents lie in cold cases on view. I have been here before to see the quilts of dead women and the brushed smoke and sunlight of dead men. Each time I circle the poet's mountain, hewn from a single piece of bluish jade. To one who looks closely, it is possible to see drunken men, poets, winding up the side of a glassy mountain, tottering, unaware, near precipices, over slender bridges, their thin beards quavering with excitement. They are part of a world as fragile and polished as the road they tread. From a distance, the mountain looks like a heavy cloud or a dragon's blue egg. Do you suppose the poets know this? Do they think that if they get their words just right, the mountain might split open with a clap of thunder? If so, would this be praise? And to conclude, I'd like to, the first ekphrastic poems I wrote were inspired by paintings. I still like to write those. This last poem is inspired more by the painter, a young painter, Sasha Gordon, who is mostly known for her self-portraits. And there's a quote from her as an epigraph to this poem called Self as Portraits. She says, painting is so much about patience. Opacity and revelation layer over and against each other. Oils thinned to sheerness of mist and clearer than coastal waters, or thick as peninsulas. I paint me to see me. I paint me under and over again and again, the way weather will cover this earth for a season of snow, a monsoon of rainbow. Thank you very much.